This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, we're on. So if I can make the little menu go, that'll kill everything.
Shouldn't.
Maybe you're in the meeting.
Cancel them. You just got to talk around it. I don't think you can.
There we go. All right, so here we are. Fundraising in a pandemic. We're going to talk about some lessons and strategies. A lot of good material out there. So let me just first and foremost tell you, this is not original material. I did not come up with a lot of this on my own. So I hope you're getting lots of good resources coming your way through all the nonprofit channels that you're engaged in. And my recommendation would be read everything. Read everything everybody's trying to do. See what folks are having success with. We'll talk about some of those right now. And it's kind of like a parent sending your kid off to college. We've done everything we can do. We've read everything we can read, and now you're on your own. So these are truly uncharted waters. But we'll talk through some things that some folks are doing that are successful, and see if we can all end up with a good year end. So the agenda today is going to be fairly brief. On my clicker. We're going to look at some survey results. We've done a survey a couple different times this year. We did it right before East Texas Giving Day in April, and then Holly sent it out again yesterday and got some additional feedback. So we thought we'd compare and contrast, what people were thinking in April and what they're thinking now. We'll kind of talk through an assessment of the organization. Where are you as an organization thinking about your operational capacity? Where do you go? What do you do? Several lessons learned from some articles that have been out recently, and talk through a number of different strategies that folks are suggesting to fundraise in this type of setting. So first of all, let's look at our survey results. So again, the light bar is April results from 70 respondents. There were 185 organizations surveyed, 70 respondents. The 185 was the folks that were participating in East Texas Giving Day. So 70 of them responded in April. 41 responded in September. So a little bit lower number. So it's not, I'm not saying this is scientific by any means, but it's the responses that we're getting here locally from our local charities in East Texas. In April, 72% of organizations said they were having to cancel fundraising events. That was in April. I think a lot of folks had hopes that they could just postpone those later in the summer or even this fall. But now if you look at September, now that's gone up to 80% are canceling fundraising events. So it's just getting more difficult to try to pull something off even this fall. There are a handful of organizations that are attempting it, but a number of organizations that are not trying that either. I was just on a phone call earlier today talking about a conference that's normally held in March, and they've already said they're going virtual with a March 2021 conference. So I don't know where this ends. I think it behooves everybody that's doing event fundraising to try to get really good, really fast in other things, because events are just really taking it on the chin, and it looks like may continue for a while. Still about the same number, 41 to 46% from April to September, saying reduced fee for services. So again, all the organizations that participate are receiving fees. I saw Chris on earlier, the museums, the performing arts, things like that, where you're actually taking in fees and you have ticket sales and you're expecting people to show up for things. That is really impactful for organizations that are counting on those types of revenues. And lastly, which kind of applies to everybody, whether you're in the ticket business or not, there's just an overall decline in individual donations. That did not increase significantly from the April survey, but it's consistent. You know, it doesn't look like there's any let up in that over now 6 months. We asked a new question in September, so out of 41 responses, we didn't think to ask this in April. It was still early in the year, but now as of September, the question is, which of the following best describes your overall revenue for 2020 thus far? 12% said it's gone up from last year, and we'll talk about, you know, some of the organizations may be impacted by you know, an actual increase in revenues. 68% though are saying, hey, things are down from here, and only 20% are saying it's kind of the same. So we'll look at some of the reasons behind that, but that's certainly a number of organizations still either trying to make up those losses or will have to permanently do without that revenue. What's the estimated net revenue loss? This was an interesting trend. So back in April, you know, 42 said, hey, it's going to be about less than $20 impact on our organization. Now that number's dropped to 26% now, and the higher bars are going to the right, which is more revenue lost. 20% now saying 25 to 75. 73% or 7.3% in that 75 to 150 range. But then look at the big ones, over 150,000. That number is nearly double from where it was in April. And then still a lot of uncertainty, still in that unknown category. All right, next question we asked, how many months of cash operating reserves does your organization have? Again, asked the same question in April and September. Numbers are holding pretty steady. Folks don't have an unlimited amount of operating reserves. Still, most folks are saying 2 to 6 months. We're right on that 6-month margin here right now. So if things don't turn around or organizations don't find some other type of fundraising success, operating reserves are going to be depleted here very shortly. And we'll talk about some of the other programs that have possibly infused some operating reserves over time as well. Because of COVID-19, has your nonprofit experienced an increase in demand for services? So back in April, we were about 47% with increased demand. In September, 53%. And then the reverse, you know, the other side of that coin, the number of folks that have not seen an increase in demand has diminished somewhat since April. And we'll talk about, that's a two-edged sword. So increased demand is increased demand, but it brings increased awareness and you know, increased fundraising opportunities for you if your demand is high and you're effectively communicating that. What types of things has COVID affected your organization? Again, the light bar is April numbers, the darker color is September numbers. Still, folks seeing significantly fewer volunteers. You know, we appreciate retirees and the type of work that they provide, and it is very impactful. They're the ones that are potentially subject to COVID and needing to take extra precautions. Increased staff hours. This was an interesting change. In fact, the next two questions, the increased staff hours and the reduced staff hours. Let me stop a second. Screen sharing. So you're just looking at my face. That's not any good because I'm looking at these beautiful charts. Let's try that. Share something else. Screen share that. All right, see if that's working out. Holly's in the control room telling me what I'm Sharon. So 29% of organizations said increased staff hours. So this is just taking more to do maybe the same amount of work or additional work over what you've been doing prior to COVID. And then the reverse on that second question, 19% now down from 48% are saying reduce staff hours. So I think initially people were shut down and home and hoping this would pass. Remember the phrase 2 weeks to flatten the curve? We were all duped by that one. So when 2 weeks was over, the curve was not sufficiently flat, and we are still all in this never land of trying to operate remotely and dealing with the effects of COVID. So we know it's taking a toll on you guys personally, and the work that you're having to put in to try to get this done. Still challenges with technology. Obviously, still challenged with technology. That's not something that's I'm immune to. Trying to figure out how to do Zooms. In fact, I did a couple things different today to try to make it a little bit better, but sometimes that works and sometimes that doesn't. So there's challenges with staff working remotely, trying to connect with people and keep them connected and keep projects moving and services being delivered. About the same number on increased demand for services from clients, some disruption needed to deliver services, other things we're having to deal with. Next question, again, this was just asked in September. We didn't think to ask it in April, but the good news here is 95% of organizations say they can accept donations online. There's still 4.8% out there that cannot accept donations online, and all I can tell you is you need to work on that as hard as you can, because online contributions are critical. And once you get it set up, and there's some cost to getting into that game, and there's some cost to playing the game. Credit cards charge, these platforms charge, but at the end of the day, you've got to have that revenue, and 96 cents on the dollar or 92 cents on the dollar is better than no dollars. So you need to make sure that platform's available. And we've gone through it enough times here, changing credit card providers, working with the different Giving Day platforms. If you've got questions on that, if you are struggling trying to figure that out, call us and we'll talk you through, try to give you some places to go to try to get that resolved. Okay, end of year. This is a new question in September here. How many of you are planning any of the following types of campaigns before the end of the year? 56% are doing online fundraising events. I know the United Way has announced that they're participating in a more significant way on Giving Tuesday. Since we started doing ETCF Giving Day, we've always talked about Giving Tuesday. Hopefully the skills that you have picked up over the years participating in Giving Day will come in handy for you on Giving Tuesday. So if you're one of those Smith County United Way agencies that's participating in that will come in handy. Other organizations may just see that as a better opportunity this year than it has been in years past to go ahead and try to get some additional contributions. Giving Tuesday, again, is that Tuesday following Black Friday, following Thanksgiving. So we're not pushing it. It's not an East Texas Giving Day event at this point, so we're not doing all the local media buys that really promotes East Texas Giving Day, but there will be some national type emphasis on that. So if your organization is part of, say Feeding America or one of the other organizations that may be pushing that a little harder, you might get some additional support in participating in Giving Tuesday. But you may also have another online fundraising event. You may have moved one of your in-person events to an online platform. So hopefully those skills are there and available for you to use. 24% are still hoping for an in-person fundraising event. I've been going to high school football games the last few weeks. It seems a lot less populated, but they're still playing high school football. So hopefully some of these in-person fundraising events will be able to take place as we get a handle on this virus. Direct mail, certainly the tried and true fundraising platform. Over half of the organizations that responded are planning direct mail before the end of the year, and then full of other activities. So from your perspective as an organization, you've got to kind of assess your situation. Where are we, and what can we do about it? What do we need to do about it? So looking at your mission first, are you able to fulfill your mission? Some organizations are just flat not able to do anything towards their mission. Others are still right on target. If your mission's helping people, there's a lot of people that need help out there right now. So many organizations are finding that they are still adequately able to fulfill their mission, though they're having to kind of shift some of the ways they're doing that. So I term that mission shift versus mission drift. You got to be careful in a crisis like this, when your mission shifts, that it doesn't drift too far away from what it is supposed to be. But it's times like that might push you into a different direction. Just don't go it alone. Make sure you've got support from your board and others if you feel a significant drift or shift happening, because that could be your new mission going forward. Finances, do you have adequate resources to fulfill the objectives and mission of your organization? From an operations standpoint, what kind of adjustments are you having to make? Are you continuing on with normal operations? Do you have some temporary operation activities in place the way you plan to operate in the short term? Or are you having to make permanent adjustments to your operations? So
I'm sorry, see what?
finally, how does that affect your?
Okay, well, Houston Chief asked me to call.
Hang on a second. Let me see if I can.
Tucker ready, or do you know, or do I need to wait for her?
Hugh, do you mind muting, please? There we go. All right. So what's your role when you look at how your organization's having to function right now? What is fundraising having to contribute to that? Is it the same contribution you were expected to contribute when things were going swell in 2019? Or is fundraising having to step up? Or is fundraising actually taking a backseat to other activities or resources that you have coming in to finance your operation? So know where you are as an organization. One of the easy ways to kind of look at your fundraising strategy is looking back at the old pyramid of giving. Where do you stand in terms of your annual gifts? What are your different annual gift opportunities throughout the year? What are you doing with major gifts? What are you doing with planned gifts? We will revisit this at the end after we look at several different strategies and see if there's some ideas on how you may be making shifts. But always the objective on this giving pyramid is you start folks down with annual giving, new donors coming in, you identify folks, you start communicating with them, building a relationship with them that leads to greater interest and involvement with your organization, then finally an investment possibly in your organization with a testamentary gift. But opportunities to participate and support your organization through campaigns throughout the way. But it all starts with effective annual giving, finding people and building relationships with them. So I've said from early on when we started doing Giving Day, there's kind of three different responses that nonprofits have had to coronavirus. Many nonprofits have experienced increased services. This is primarily the social service organizations: food and nutrition, healthcare, employment, housing, counseling services, those kinds of things that are kind of on the front line dealing with people that are impacted by the coronavirus. Along with increased demand for a lot of these different charitable services, that there's also been increased attention. So all of a sudden the media is paying attention to the work that you do day in and day out, year in and year out, but now all of a sudden it's a story because there's a crisis going on. So that increased attention in some cases has led to increased fundraising and has also drawn the attention of lawmakers who have potentially created pools of resources to help organizations that see this kind of activity. Another group of organizations has had to significantly alter their services. I look at the education and employment training, the Literacy Council, the Christian Women's Job Corps, and all our schools and educational institutions moving to online instruction in a situation now with kind of these precarious restarts. Can we get school started? Do we have to shut it down? If we shut it down, is it just the classroom? Is it the grade level? Is it the campus? So there's a lot of alterations going on in that space. There was a significantly predicted reduced enrollment for colleges and universities. There was a group that was surveying and tracking that data from March and April. But the colleges I've talked to, I specifically called TJC yesterday to find out, where they were standing. They're about flat in enrollment from 2019. So they've not seen a significant reduction. I was out in Brownwood last week at Howard Payne. They're seeing an increased enrollment. So I think on the college situation, it comes down to how have those colleges connected with current students and incoming freshmen. And those that have done a better job communicating what's going to happen and how it's going to work are not seeing significant decreases in enrollment. So that's good, but they're all having to go through significant changes, lots of planning, lots of work on campuses all across our region to try to make school happen this fall, and certainly all the technology challenges that go with that. And East Texas, one of those big technology challenges is our ruralness, the fact that we're not sitting on top of one another with cell towers and great internet access. So that continues to be a challenge for those organizations that are altering their services. And then there's the third category that are basically in near shutdown. Though I'm always amazed at folks' creativity. So you would expect the museum and performing arts folks to get real creative, and they're having to do that and trying to figure out how to deliver cultural arts in this type of setting where you can't hold a concert or a program. So, and churches kind of fall in that too in terms of venues where large people gather. So churches have experienced that to some extent, and they're starting to kind of open back up slowly. But the shutdown for many months was 0 events, 0 ticket revenue, and declining contributions, because surely you're not spending any money if you're not having to do events. So, organizations like that are suffering significant declines, though many of their expenses continue, even though they can't get ticket revenue. So they're having to get creative. So what are some nonprofits doing? So as you look around the field, there was a Chronicle of Philanthropy article that came out in August, I think, and it was talking about planning for year-end fundraising and uncertainty, and gave several examples. Pretty lengthy article. I'm going to hit a few of the highlights. One of the things they were talking about is focusing on donors who have given in 2020. You'd think, well, they've already given in 2020. How would they be in line to give again? And it comes back to communication. If you emphasize back to those folks how their gifts have been used, they are aware that this situation has not gone away since they last gave. So communication, I'm going to sound like I'm beating a dead horse, on the communication front, but it really does come back to how well you're communicating back with donors, how you spent their gift. Another lesson was focusing on large donors who have weathered the financial crisis. So back in mid-April, it might be difficult to have had a conversation with somebody about, giving out of their current economic, stability, because things were not stable in April, but they've recovered significantly, not quite back 100% in terms of where the economy is, but certainly what they call a V-type rebound versus a U-type rebound that stays down for a long time and slowly creeps back up. So folks that are in that situation with their investment portfolios and their businesses may be in a good situation right now to continue to think about giving, whereas earlier in April they may not have, they may have been kind of putting a hold on things. There are certainly businesses that have been thriving through this and other businesses that have been hurting, but if your donors are in the category that's been experiencing some success through this, then they're good targets for fall fundraising activity. Another thing nonprofits are doing is check-in calls with donors. Just taking the time, since there's no meetings taking place, there's no travel, there's no conferences and conventions, people have a little more time thanking and updating donors, using that time to make contacts with folks, serving donors. When you make that contact with somebody, it's just real simple to ask, how are you doing? Do you need anything? There are certainly a number of donors in the senior category that would welcome that human interaction. So you think, man, I don't want to bother anybody in the middle of a pandemic. Well, what if you're one of the only 2 or 3 people they get to talk to today? And they may really appreciate an opportunity to talk to you about what's going on. And then if they've been a supporter, which is typically how you get their name and phone number, then they have expressed interest in your organization and would probably be very open to hearing how your organization is doing in this situation, how you're serving people, what your needs are. And those folks may have physical needs too. So it may be, you may not get to see or visit with a donor like you normally would, but you might get to go pick up groceries for them. And that might go just as well or even further in solidifying a great relationship with somebody who has a need that you can meet. I'm not saying you have to open online grocery business, but depending on the donor and the situation, that might be an appropriate way to reach out and have some human interaction. A number of organizations are very creatively replacing spring and fall events. So more events are going from actual to virtual. I think there's online auctions and things going. Sometimes the time frame is extended. So where you would normally do an auction and an evening event or something, you may do an auction over 1 or 2 weeks and try to accomplish somewhat near the same objective. So other things nonprofits are doing when it comes to holiday giving, which is coming up, you're planning for what you're going to do around the holidays. Holiday giving is huge for many social services. It's big for a lot of us in general because it's just an important part of fundraising, but it may be even more important for others. A little housekeeping here a second. Many of those organizations have seen increased need, increased awareness, and as a result, increased giving. So some of those social service organizations are perhaps even under less pressure going into this holiday season than normal because the awareness and the increased giving that's resulted from that has put them in a better situation. We saw that earlier. I think it was like 12% on one of our earlier charts. 12% of organizations, of the 41 organizations that responded, said they've got an increase right now in giving over what they had expected. But whatever you're doing, if you're planning a fall or holiday type fundraising, if that's a normal time that you would make an appeal to folks, tie that to what's currently going on in your organization. Don't mistake it for just another ordinary holiday. It behooves you to make the connection to say, this is how our organization's been functioning and serving our clients through this crisis, and these are our current and continuing needs. So tie it all together. Back to that communication message. Another thing about new donors. So in some cases, this crisis and the attention that your organization may have received has brought new donors. So now more than ever, how are you stewarding those new relationships? Are you building on those to try to create a long-term donor out of somebody that perhaps responded because they heard you're in crisis? So you got to find that balance between thanking somebody for a gift, taking steps to cultivate that relationship with them, and then knowing when to ask again. And some of the data is suggesting that asking again is not out of the question here. Feeding America responded, they were quoted in this Chronicle article. They said 19% of their current donors, so people that have given before and gave earlier this year, and 9% of new donors that gave as of March, I think, have all made additional gifts this year. So that's somebody that you might have only expected to give once, certainly current donors and then new donors as well, but they're receiving adequate information from the organization, I guess, in some cases, to feel appreciated for their gift, to recognize that the need continues, and to make additional gift. Another suggestion from one of the organizations was to try to inform new donors. So when somebody comes in as a new donor, one of the ways you can educate them is talking to them about monthly giving without asking for another gift. So just in your communication with them, thank them for their gift and make sure that they know that in this situation, monthly giving is really making a difference, and it's really easy to use. And if they want to consider that, here's how they would connect and participate in monthly giving without saying, you know, we need your other gift. This is just something we want you to be aware of. What else are nonprofits doing? Feeding America talked about this idea of endurance, that when they're communicating with people, they're communicating the idea that we may be in this for 12 to 18 months, and they're planning accordingly. How do you sustain that level of food bank activity, increased activity for an extended period of time? And one of the descriptions was, you know, in disaster response, the response is typically quick and short term. But so you get a lot of response from people reacting to the fact that you just experienced a disaster, your community just experienced a disaster. But this is kind of a prolonged disaster. It's not just a simple storm that came through. So people are still aware that the disaster is still unfolding before us. So it in some ways behaves like a disaster, and in some ways it's a different type of disaster, but donors are not oblivious to the fact that this is continuing on. Donors are responding to that prolonged need. So again, your communication should link that crisis to the need. You know, what's going on right now, and how is that continuing to create a need for the services that you're providing and a need for financial support to sustain that. Feeding America, when they use that strategy of talking to folks about monthly contributions, they saw a 70% increase in monthly donors since the end of 2019. So just getting that message out to those donors that's an option. I think churches, in a lot of cases, have gone to that too, that we're not passing a plate because you can't touch something someone else has just touched before you. So we're encouraging all online type giving, and that when you go online, make sure if you've got an online portal that it's got that monthly capability, because that's just an easy click way to support you. If somebody really appreciates you and knows what you're doing, they might give you that monthly support. Heifer International shared some information in this article. They paused their fundraising altogether for the months of March and April, and they resumed in May. They just felt like it wasn't appropriate to do anything as we dealt with the immediate effects of the healthcare crisis in March and April. But they got back to it in May, and they're creating some messaging to try to do a better job of linking their mission to the world food crisis. When people are out of work and one of the things they run out of first is money, and then food that they buy with their money. So there's a world food crisis, and Heifer is in the middle of trying to help folks with food crises. So they're linking their mission to what's going on in the world, keeping donors informed without really asking. So they didn't do a lot of heavy asking, but their giving is currently ahead of where it was last year. And all their communication, they feel like, is paving the way for a round of year-end appeals that they plan. It's got a customary time for them to do appeals as well. So they're hoping that goodwill and good communication throughout the year is going to yield positive results their year-end appeal. Other strategies from some other different sources, not that Chronicle article, but a variety of different articles that have come my way. One is keep fundraising. Don't get paralyzed, analysis paralysis, or any other types of paralysis. Keep at your work. Find ways to keep working. Find ways for your staff to keep working. It may require some investment in technology to make sure people can stay connected. May require some adjustments and flexibility with time, but don't give up fundraising. It may require lots of planning and scratching those plans and planning something new, and scratching those plans and planning something new, but don't stop. You've got to keep finding ways to support your mission and acquire the resources that you need. Another strategy that was talked about is getting creative, just trying to be ready to adapt to changes that are going on in the way we connect with one another. So Zoom meetings, we use GoToMeeting here, but I've been on lots of different Zoom meetings, maybe daily check-ins among your staff, and certainly with donors and others. Just going back to the old using the telephone and making those connections. It's important internally for your work to continue, that you stay connected with people. Don't just assume, I'll wait till that person comes back in the office, because this wait until that person comes back in the office is certainly getting drawn out more than we'd hoped. My niece works in Austin, and her organization works with a lot of school districts and does internet services and things like that for school districts. And they were informed a few weeks ago that they will not be coming back to work ever, not just when this is over, but ever. So so people are adapting to how do we work without being in an office, but connectivity is still important to keep the work moving and for people's mental health. It's just we're meant to be in community and in connection with people. So get creative in how you connect with your coworkers, and then certainly that translates into donors as well, and we'll talk about that. Getting creative in your communication techniques. Again, we're in the middle of a crisis, so local media may be more in tune with the ways your organization is supporting people in the crisis. And they may be more willing now than they have been in the past to help you tell your story about the work that you're doing. The work may not be much different than what you were doing 3 years ago, but the fact that it's in the middle of a crisis and there's media attention on it may work in your favor to help you spread the message about the good work that you're doing. And certainly social media does the same thing, the ability to communicate quickly and somewhat effectively to the folks that you're trying to tell your story to. This is also a good opportunity from an operational perspective to look at how can you connect with your donors. Do you even have a phone number for people if you wanted to call and check in with somebody? Do you have email addresses where you can send links to your social media pages? This may be a good time to, when you're making those phone calls to check in with people, that you ask for an email address if you don't already have one, and just indicate, hey, this we're doing a whole lot more electronically than we've done in the past. Could we get your email so we can send you information and help keep you connected? A little infrastructure housekeeping while you're at it. Getting creative involves looking at new channels, new technology, new apps that are out there. So again, stay well read as stuff comes into your inbox talking about new apps and new opportunities and the way technology is being used in various nonprofit organizations. Some of that may be applicable to you, and you may need to connect with it, but you gotta know it's there. But always, whether you're getting on some national bandwagon or fundraising program or something, make sure that you're able to tell your local story. Keep that local focus, because that's what your donors here want to hear. How are my neighbors being impacted by this? Other strategies then, when you look towards sustainability, we talked about that in a couple of the examples. Maybe you need to put a strategy in place to upgrade those donors to monthly giving. Maybe you need to look at the details of what that would entail, either changes on your website online portal or changes in the template information that you send out to people about online giving, maybe stories about monthly giving to help communicate that it's an option and a lot of people are using it, and the fact that it makes such a difference. You may not think $20 contribution makes a difference, but what if somebody signs up for $20 and does it for the next 3 years? Those small, consistent gifts make a difference. If you're uncertain about how that steady cash flow makes a difference, talk to your finance person, because they should be able to reiterate that monthly income is greatly appreciated and a lot easier to try to plan for than, for example, estate gifts, which are much harder to plan. Another strategy is just being flexible and adaptable. If you haven't learned that yet through this crisis, that's a good lesson to pick up. And it's not, I had 3 or 4 different words in here about change, and I finally landed on just expect it. It's not planning for change, it's not preparing for change, it's expecting it. Change is what we're going to get here for a while. So just expect it, and don't be caught off guard when things change again. You got to be patient with that change. You got to be patient with programs. You got to be patient with people, because it takes people a while to adapt to change. My sister-in-law was a big fan of, she was a high school principal, and one of her mottos was give grace. So that's a good motto for all of us. Give grace. You don't know specifically, or you may know more, but in a lot of cases, you don't know exactly what somebody is having to go through. on a daily basis how they're having to deal with this crisis, how it impacts people and their families. So give lots of grace in this setting, and give lots of encouragement. If you're a leader in your organization or looked up to by others in your organization, be the one that's the encourager, and encourage people that change is okay, and we're all in this together, and we'll all be able to handle anything that comes along, because we're working together and we're working for a good cause, and our mission's good. We're helping people. Other strategies, honesty is always a good strategy. I can go back and do my ethics seminar from AFP if you need some more honesty information. But honestly communicating the impact of this virus, the way it's impacted your programs and your fundraising activities, you got to find the right tone in being honest. There's such a thing as brutally honest, and that is not necessarily helpful because some people won't take that well. So you got to find the right tone when you're trying to communicate a message that's difficult. You want to be clear, concise, sincere, and if you do those things, you'll probably be more effective in the way you communicate what's going on with your organization, how it's having an impact on your programs and your fundraising, and what you're trying to do to respond to the increased need and the increased need for resources. Another strategy for fundraising in the pandemic is considering some other funding opportunities. Be aware of what's going on with government programs. Congress is meeting regularly. The Texas State Legislature hasn't met once during this pandemic, but the federal government has met and has doled out trillions of dollars. So you need to be aware if any of those trillions are trickling towards programs and services that you're providing. I've talked to many nonprofit organizations that took advantage of the payroll protection program. There still may be some resources left in that. If you thought, well, I think we'll weather this storm, it'll be okay, and now things are looking a little more troubling, you may still have an opportunity to participate in a program like that, or it may get renewed. So you may have missed it. You may have used it in accordance with the way it was set up, but there may be more money coming along later in new bills and new funding. So be aware of those and how your organization may utilize some of those. Another group that is responding to some of these emergency funding activities is foundations. I know at the Communities Foundation, with some of our discretionary grant making in different programs, we open things up a whole lot more. Instead of looking for, a lot of times we look for kind of new programs or things that are different. This year it's been more general operating support, and not a need to prove a lot of activity other than you're trying to keep the doors open and trying to serve increased growing demand in your community. So some foundations are opening emergency grant opportunities. Other foundations are just relaxing some of their criteria. So you may have ruled yourself out in years past for funding from certain foundations. It may be worth checking in with them, maybe checking their website or calling somebody to see if there are any new funding opportunities as they respond to this crisis. Donor advised funds are another example. The Communities Foundation has about 125 donor advised funds, but around the country there are thousands and thousands and thousands of donor advised funds. What that means is that people put money away into their donor advised fund perhaps sometime before this year. Many of our donor advised funds are decades old, and people are still using them on a regular basis. But what that means is that the current crisis is not affecting their ability to make distributions and grants out to charities, because that money was put in there long ago. So look back through your fundraising, the gifts that you've received. If people have been contributing using donor advised funds, see if they've done that yet this year, or if they've done about what they did last year, or whether they did, looks like they did more. Did they respond to some information they're getting from you that prompted them to give more than they've given in the past? Donor advised funds are good resources and less impacted by the current economy, which not only is there a global pandemic and significant unemployment, but here in East Texas, we're significantly impacted by the energy sector as well. And that was declining before the virus came along. So there was a pullback, significant pullback in the cost of or the price of crude oil and fossil fuels in the early part of the year, and that's just been exacerbated by coronavirus. So again, donor advised funds and foundations are operating a little bit beyond current economic crises. All right, last couple things here. We're about at our time limit. Another strategy for fundraising in the pandemic is focusing on human interaction. Again, finding ways to personally connect with donors, particularly if you've got donors who are senior and maybe significantly more isolated than they have been in the past. It's a great time to have a conversation with them. I know Baylor had a strategy, still does have a strategy, have a call center on campus where they have current students calling previous donors and alumni. Well, who wouldn't want to talk to a current college student right now about what's going on back at the old alma mater? So the same kind of thing in your situation. Your donors have had an interest in your organization. They know everybody's going through difficulty. What does it take to spend a few minutes on the phone with them and thank them for their continued support and let them know how your organization is handling this crisis and serving people? And lastly, being realistic in this situation. And sometimes that may involve some difficult and drastic options for your organization. But just know that you didn't bring this on yourself. You may be looking at eliminating or suspending certain services or programs that you have. You may be looking at layoffs. There may be opportunities for mergers as nonprofits who are doing very similar things find themselves in difficult situations, and a merger might be in the offing, or potential closure of your organization. So as you're dealing with people, going back to that idea of honesty and realism, if this pandemic is really putting the hurt on your organization, it may need to close for a period of time and regroup and potentially open again at some point in the future. Keeping those lines of communication open as things like that start to evolve, as programs change and layoffs happen. If you've got a donor that has consistently funded a certain program, but you're having to change that program, that'd be a good person to call and make sure they hear it from you first and the reasons why, before they hear it on the street that your organization has cut a beloved program that they've supported over the years. So keep those lines of communication open. Then we're back to that pyramid of giving. So you see how annual, major, and planned gifts all work together. Here's kind of what it looked like pre-pandemic. So on the annual giving side, you may have been doing newsletters and special events and participate in East Texas Giving Day. And now you've converted in the middle of this pandemic to video updates, maybe reconsidering a strategy to get more engaged in Giving Tuesday in December. You may be taking it more seriously to follow up and build those relationships with new donors that come along, and just watching out for gifts from new donors as as awareness builds about how your organization is responding to the crisis, maybe drawing people in. You need to be sure you get a hold of those names and thank those folks. On the major gift side, visiting donor prospects has, perhaps evolved into video visits, sharing client stories you might have done in the past to get somebody to give a major gift. Now it's just simply communicating the simple impact of your organization, trying to do all this without events. If that was a big deal for your organization. It may have also been a big deal for utilizing your board to help fill tables and invite other folks to your events. You need to get creative and talk to the board about how important that work was, even though there's not an event. How can you perhaps make some of those types of connections without an event? And then on the plan giving side, talking about some of your more senior donors, you might go visit in the past, but now think about regular check-ins and just that human interaction and sharing your impact. So closing thoughts, be flexible, be creative, and you can't over communicate what's going on. I think one of the organizations cited that they do a daily email out to folks. That may be a lot, but it depends on your organization. It may not be a lot for your particular organization, but communicating clearly and as frequently as needed to keep your donors informed of the ongoing need and the way you're responding to challenges in this pandemic. So I don't know if I can open this up for other folks. Let me unmute everybody. If that works. If anybody's got any questions, or we'll finish it up. I think folks have muted themselves, so I can't unmute everybody. So if you've got a question, or make a comment, feel free. All right. I'll take that as everybody's happy. Appreciate all the work that each of you are doing. It is not unnoticed, and hopefully it's being a little more noticed, perhaps. The media, is sometimes good at responding to a crisis situation, and we're not in one right now. I don't know what one looks like. So take advantage of that and stay in great communication with your donors. Thank you all for participating today.
Thank you. This was very good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. Thank you.